Please welcome your host from random corners of the world, making his way through the jungle of online businesses to $10 million. Anthony Spector. Anthony Spector.
Oh, live things. Live things always go wrong. Hi. All right. So we are officially live. Hey guys, welcome to 10 Million Journey Podcast. My name is Anatoly, and this is a place where I document how I scale my business to 10 million and talk to amazing entrepreneurs along the way. And my guest is Anthony Cofrancesco. Anthony has a wild and exciting journey from dropping out of college, becoming an entrepreneur, to working in Amazon itself, dealing with warehouse fraud, mitigating some of the hot situations, to being an Amazon seller, to having an Amazon agency in the Philippines, and currently being part of one of my favorite tools, PickFu, or PickFu, depends how you pronounce it. It allows you to split the different elements of your products, copy images, and get a real feedback from real people. I love that tool used all the time. So long story short, we are in for a treat. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Anatoly, thanks so much for having me on. That was a really crazy intro. I really love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been following your journey for quite some time. That's why I'm so excited. I know we both have love for travel. So before we start digging into your journey, I watched some of your Facebook stories, latest ones. I know that you had a free course fondue for $20 and that you found a Swiss-like city in South America. Can you tell me more about that? Where are you currently at and what's happening there?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the greatest joys of travel is, especially if you're a digital nomad, is you kind of go from place to place and you're not always sure where you're going to end up. And so right now I'm in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, but this past weekend, we were here for the first week. We met up with some random people that we found online, and they recommended you have to check out Campos de Jordão, which is it's like a whole town, and it's just filled with Swiss architecture. And so we went there this past weekend. It's up in the countryside, and really known for their fondue and their cheeses and the meats as well. And we just had a great time, and it was beautiful.
Wow. So fondue was as good as you describing it in your Facebook story. They were good.
Very good. Delicious. Yeah.
Amazing. I need to check it out. I'm digital nomad as well. So everyone who talks to me about places to travel, I'm taking my notes right away. So definitely going to check that out. So I want to start with your entrepreneurial journey. I know that your journey started when you went to the Lean Startup Conference, and then you realized there's a whole world of entrepreneurship there, not just working for someone. What about this conference impressed you the most and sort of built entrepreneur of you?
Yeah, so before that conference, I really hadn't, I'd heard the word entrepreneur. I'd seen Shark Tank. I didn't really understand what it was. And so how that actually happened is I was just I was going to the University of Florida for uni, and I was part of the Entrepreneurship Club Facebook page. And I remember I got a notification one day that someone had made a post. And basically the post said, hey, we got free tickets from Intuit, the software tool. It said, we got free tickets to this Lean Startup Conference in California. And at the time I was really into travel hacking, and I had a bunch of airline miles. And the conference was a few days away. And I was like, well, sweet. Like, this is a free trip to California. I didn't know what the Lean Startup Conference was. I just had never been to California by myself. And so I was like, looked at my airline miles, had enough to go, and, put in the application for one of the tickets, which we got. And when I went on that trip, there was maybe like 4 guys from the University of Florida, and I didn't know anyone. They were just like, oh, they gave us a free hotel room, and we're all splitting it. It's at the Fairmont. And I was like, okay, this sounds fun. So I flew out to San Francisco, and then I met up with these guys, and that was really where the trip started. Really getting a feel in that community, and the guys were all, I think, in the best way, and I think we can all probably relate to this. They're all a little bit weird, right? Like, we're all like quirky people. As soon as we get in the same space, we just start talking, and all these ideas are flowing. And I remember that first night, I was sharing a bed, right? Because there was 4 guys in one hotel room, and I was sharing a bed with this other guy, and it was maybe like midnight, maybe later. And mind you, we had flown from the East Coast, so it was a bit of jet lag. And I was sitting in bed next to this guy next to me, and he had his laptop open and he had this Excel sheet. And I was like, dude, like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, this is a name of everyone at the conference. It's their first name, their last name, their email address, their title, and then it had a photo of them. And he's like, he was the president of the Entrepreneurship Club. He's like, I want to go and try to meet these people tomorrow and invite them to come and speak for the Entrepreneurship Club at UF. And he's like, there's like the founder of Redbox here and the COO of FedEx and all of these companies. And I was like, did you put all of that together yourself? And he's like, no, my VA did it. And I was like, what's a VA? And so, that's kind of what started it. Throughout the whole weekend, though, I was going around and chatting with other people there, and they were pitching me on their business ideas. And I remember coming out of that weekend thinking, oh my gosh, this is a whole world. I had only come from a corporate background, and I was like, this is a whole world that I didn't even know existed. And so long story short, and I'm sure we're going to unpack some of that in the interview today, that group of friends expanded, and then my whole mindset changed just through the connections I made of people who saw the world in a totally different way.
Wow. Yeah, truly amazing. And people who don't know that VAs can create huge spreadsheets, they're in for a treat, because that's true. I didn't know that either before I started working with VAs, but it's such a convenient tool, you can say, or such a convenient hack you can use, that somebody can just support you with your business and create those leads for you. In one of the interviews, you were saying that your first step into entrepreneurship was working for The Points Guy. Actually, amazing website. I love that. It's all about how to get traveling for free or travel hacks. And you did work for them for free. And I just want to ask you, I know that a lot of people will be surprised. They're like, wow, he worked for somebody for free. Can you unpack that? Why did you decide to work for free? Because I think there's a thread of entrepreneurs I interviewed that they started working somewhere for free. And I just want people to understand why it's important.
Yeah, sure. So when I started working for The Points Guy, first off, I started travel hacking on my own. And then, like most people, stumbled onto that website. And basically, I just thought this whole world of travel hacking, that you could sign up for these credit cards, you could go and travel for free. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so when I first started, I was taking these trips. I was staying in hotels that were way more expensive than I could ever afford at that time. And so I was just really infatuated with the product. I thought it was so cool, and I thought the message was so cool. And so I really just reached out to them and was like, hey, I want to help out. I think this is really cool. I think there's a whole potential to reach a younger audience with this content of people who are traveling for like these work interviews. And I just wanted to help out. And I said, you can, I'd love to work for you guys, and you don't have to pay me at all. Based on my earlier experience in life, I had many experiences where I had done a job. And then if I got my foot in the door, like my first job where I worked at a bike shop, I just kind of worked and started working there. I didn't ask anything about pay. I just knew that, that led to a job. My first job doing research at the University of Florida in an entomology lab, like I wasn't getting paid at first, but I was very confident that if I could just go in, start doing something, start providing value, that most people aren't, they're not going to say, hey, I'm not going to end up paying you eventually. Like if you can provide value, you'll get paid. And so I was very confident that that's what would happen with The Points Guy. I don't know if it's necessarily true that I didn't get paid. I offered in the beginning, hey, you don't have to pay me at all. And I sent probably 15 emails that no one responded to. And it was kind of like just by being very, very persistent that I was working an internship up in New Jersey over the summer. And I emailed them and said, it was like maybe the 20th engagement that I had of pitching myself to work for them. And it was at the end of my internship. I was up near New York and New Jersey. And I was like, hey, they pretty much said, hey, we'll swing by our office. And I ended up swinging by their office, and I got to see them face to face. And during that conversation, I was talking about, oh, I'm leaving on a few days to take a trip to Iceland on this airline called WOW Air, which was like really cheap flights to Iceland. And they're like, we don't have anyone reviewing the airline. Can you write a review on it? And I was like, you're telling me, it was like the first conversation I had, like I'll get to get paid. And it was nothing. It was like $200 to write a review, and I'd already paid for my tickets. So it was like, I was definitely losing money there. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get to write an article on reviewing an airline. This is the coolest thing. And so that's kind of how it started.
I think that's amazing. And this is a thread. A lot of people are saying, okay, I don't know how to get my foot in the door. I'm just here. I'm just sitting there. I need some job. but they don't understand that. And I think this is a thread, as I was saying, across many entrepreneurs I interview. You need to bring value first. If you bring value, people see that you're valuable. People will pay you because there's no other way. They need to keep you. And for you to sort of survive, you need to get paid. So essentially, if you're amazing, you'll get paid. And I think that's a very powerful message, not to be afraid to work somewhere for free because you believe in the idea and then you believe in the trust.
Well, and to the other thing I'll say is, like, I had a very clear value proposition for them. Their target audience for the articles were very clearly people who are, maybe 30, 40 years old or older, right? Much older people. And so I had a very clear idea that I said, hey, there's a lot of these young adults, maybe, around 20 plus years old, but young adults that have like really good credit scores. They've worked some jobs. They have a limited credit history, but they're running different organizations. They're really active in traveling. And so they can actually go and get approved for these cards. And you should start tailoring some content towards this younger audience. And I had like when I sent them the emails, it wasn't just like, hey, hire me. It was like, hey, hire me, but I could be your gap, your bridge into this younger audience and demographic. And I don't think they ever really ended up, like, I pitched them hard on that. And when I started working for them, I really pitched them on going after that audience. And I don't think they were ever really interested in doing it, but just like taking that risk and thinking outside of the box, they saw, oh, there's some potential here. And even if we're going to have them end up doing the things that we're doing anyway, it's just that kind of energy that I think people are receptive to, rather than just saying, just hire me. There's something tangible that I was offering, even if it was never executed on.
Yeah, it's such great advice. Just to always do your research and come up with people with some suggestions. And if they believe in your suggestions, they will give you a chance. Which I think, and one chance is enough to just change your life forever. So, as a fellow traveler, that's a hard word to say. As a fellow traveler, I have to ask. You had a talk once, and I think that's very interesting. But I want to unpack it a little bit about travel hacks for business owners. And can you name a couple of hacks that would work these days to get to travel for free or to benefit from traveling using credit cards, or anything you want to talk about in this regards?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest travel hack and kind of the basis of that talk that I gave a few years ago is, I think a lot of people know this, but most businesses, especially FBA businesses, especially businesses based in like affiliate marketing, any kind of where you're running a lot of money through pay-per-click advertising. Not only, you got to pay for that pay-per-click advertising somehow. And so you might as well, if you can, put it on a credit card, pay it off at the end of the month, and you're going to earn some kind of points for it. Like Facebook, Google, they're not going to charge you anymore for paying with a credit card versus paying in ACH or using a debit card or anything like that. So that's the basic one, right? Like, I know people that are spending just crazy amounts of money every single month. And so if you're putting that money onto a credit card and you're earning travel points, then you're going to earn travel points for free travel. Now, there's some cards that are just crazy in terms of redemption, like the American Express Gold card. You can earn like 3 points per every dollar spent. The Chase Inc. for Business, I believe still is 3 points per dollar spent, up to like 150 grand in advertising a year. And so those advertising categories count for 3x. And so, there's a whole world of, you can go and sign up for credit cards and get the credit card sign up bonuses, but eventually that's going to max out. Once you sign up for the cards, there's limits now. It's not as big as it used to be. But if you're running a business and you're doing a lot of advertising spend, or even like for the company I work for now, it's all on the list of like, hey, we're spending so much money on advertising, we should just be switching the cards. And then it's like, when we're traveling to go to these conferences, by and large, you can definitely get some really valuable trips out of it. And I know people who are business owners that just have, millions of miles that they're just sitting on. And the cool thing too is, like, let's say your audience is let's say they're not actually running a business. They're helping to manage someone else's advertising spends. These are the kind of recommendations that you can bring to the business owner, that the business owner, I've found most of the time that they're too busy to actually worry about any of this stuff. And so that's a great way that you can provide value, is like, if the company you're working for is spending like 20 grand a month on pay-per-click advertising, to go to them and say, hey, do you realize that anytime you travel, you could be traveling for free, and all you got to do is switch your method of payment from this one to this one, and now all of a sudden you free up all this free cash for travel? Like, those are valuable recommendations, and it takes like maybe a few hours to set up.
For sure. So pick up the right credit card, and you're recommending American Express Gold or American Express cards, and Chase. I mean, if you're in US, I guess that would apply. American Express, I think, applies everywhere, but
Pretty much
Chase.
everywhere, yeah.
I try to get Chase. I'm from Canada originally, so if you're not from US, it might be harder. But American Express for sure. And then the hack that many people talk about, and you talk about as well. For example, Amazon PPC. You can switch from charging it onto Amazon, sort of part of your Amazon budget, to actual credit card, and then you'll be earning points. So the small fix will allow you to travel for free. Amazing. So much value already. I know that after Points Guy, you worked at actually Amazon. You're the first guest here who worked for Amazon. So what did you do there? It was a pretty interesting job as far as I know. So can you talk more about it?
Yeah, so Amazon does a lot of recruiting through the university system in the States, obviously. And I remember I had done some internships in the past. They were at one of the career fairs, and I met up with the recruiter, and it seemed like it was a real straightforward kind of culture. I ended up getting my first internship in Tampa, and it was something that I didn't know anything about. It was like I don't really know how it happened, but I think it was like maybe it was the open role at the time, and it was for loss prevention, and I didn't know what loss prevention was. But essentially, what loss prevention is they've got these huge fulfillment centers, a few thousand workers in there, and more than 1 million square feet. And so what the loss prevention is in charge of is kind of taking care of inventory deviations, basically seeing if employees are stealing items from the fulfillment center, and then also things related to, it's a huge fulfillment center. It's like a little city. So sometimes there's kind of crazy situations that arise, maybe violence, people lose their temper between the employees, sometimes things a little bit more serious, like active shooter situations, or training for that, and also like natural disasters. I was working in Houston when Hurricane Harvey came through, so it's a lot of contingency planning and trying to really protect the physical property of the building and the employees as well. That's why I started out as. I did an internship in Tampa, and then that ended up turning into a full-time job that I started in Houston a few months after that.
Wow. So fraud prevention. Any stories you can share of how it actually happens? Because it's really interesting for people who are in FBA business. We're sending so much stuff on Amazon, and sometimes we're just like it got lost or something like that. So probably most of the times it got lost for a real reason. It just got lost. But sometimes it might be the case when somebody just stole it. So any scenarios you can talk about just to share with people so they have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, I can share a few. The big question people always ask is like, do associates actually steal product? The answer is definitely yes. It's an interesting dynamic, right? Because you're sitting there, and Amazon pays all of its employees very well, maybe 15 US. I think it's more now, like 17 US an hour. But everyone's got their needs, and so it's kind of interesting to see that dynamic. Like, imagine you're working all day, you're working very hard, and then after you pass like the 50th Fitbit or the iPhone, some people are inevitably going to say, well, maybe I can just take this. I think the biggest case I ever heard of was someone that stole about $250,000 in iPhones over a period of a couple of years. Basically, every day when you leave the fulfillment center, they search your bags on the way out. And so this person was very smart. They created a lunchbox with kind of hidden compartments in it. And every day when they would leave, they would put like 1 or 2 iPhones in there. And they did that for a period of almost 2 years and just stole a ton of value in phones. And so that was actually kind of what led to my intern project the first year. Basically, we had like I said, when people were leaving the fulfillment center, they were manually searching through the bags, like guards were going through and searching it. And so I put together a whole white paper around X-ray screening. And so just put the bags in an X-ray, like in an airport, and to like speed up how fast the associates were able to get out. And that was one of my big projects. I can tell you maybe like a couple other stories. One, I definitely saw some big cases in regards to vendor fraud, where, basically Chinese sellers that were on the platform would do all sorts of crazy stuff just with the intention. These fulfillment centers are massive. They would try to have the packages get lost, or messed up. So they would just put, normal stuff like putting crazy addresses on. So when the items got received, they wouldn't really know who to attribute it to. And there's all sorts of craziness there. Just really trying to confuse the FC workers. And then there was just some interesting ones as well. Like the fulfillment center I worked out of in Houston, it was not the best area in Houston. So there was like some interesting scenarios where I never encountered an active shooter situation where like someone actually had a gun, but there were like situations where we had threats of that and we had to decide, okay, how are we going to handle that? And it was very, very interesting because I learned a lot in terms of contingency planning and being prepared and what to do if certain things happen. Hurricane Harvey also came through Houston. So there was a whole thing with, Amazon doesn't really close down their fulfillment centers. It's the last thing that they want to do because it completely messes up everything in terms of supply chain. And so we shut down for, about 3 days. And there was a whole host of getting on these calls with National and a lot of contingency planning. So it was a really cool environment. And it was a really cool role as well, because even though I had just started as, after being an intern and moving on into my full-time role, the loss prevention team was kind of, I don't want to say like higher up, but just because of the gravity of the position, there was times that even though I was a new member of the loss prevention team, I might be the only person on the loss prevention team in the entire fulfillment center. And so in terms of like when things would happen, I would be kind of looped in. So I got a lot of opportunity to actually work with upper level of management, which would have taken maybe 4 or 5 years to get to. And so that's why it was kind of a cool position, getting really hands-on like leadership experience and having a lot of management capability inside of FC for just a small amount of time there.
Amazing. So the question the stereotype, let's say that way, the many people have of Amazon being this big evil corporation that has long hours and there's no trust and stuff like that. What is your opinion working at Amazon on what it is? Like how do you describe it, I guess?
Yeah, I can definitely speak a bit to that. It's definitely, some of the things that you hear about Amazon are true. It's definitely a very fast-paced culture. There's a lot going on. But what I'll say generally is that people who are working there, the vast majority of them are incredibly appreciative to have the job that they have. They're very appreciative to make as much money as they do. And I saw that firsthand. Like people are talking about they were working other jobs in the past, and this has completely changed their life to have a job where they're making that much money and to have something that's consistent and stable. And then as well, the biggest thing I saw is I don't think there's as many companies now where you can legitimately come in as a base level employee and work your way up as quickly and as high as you want in the company. Like there was many, many people in there that started out as fulfillment center workers and then worked their way up. And so aside from that, it's like, I'd say the other additional benefits of it is like, they're really aggressive in terms of their compensation for employees with like their stock plan. And so people who started working at Amazon, like even a few years ago, so many people that were just mid-level management are like multimillionaires just based on, and this was when I was there, so I can't even imagine now. Like when people talk about Jeff Bezos getting rich, it's like all of the anyone who's stayed there long enough, they're all very, very rich. And it's crazy because even my boss, it's like they would just joke every time, like, have you seen the stock price? And they're all just joking about how much money they have in their stock. And so the flip side of that, I guess, is that, if you're not a fit for Amazon, you can get very easily burnt out if you don't have the perspective of, the job is hard, right? I did the job because when you're in management, they make everyone in management go through what they call Associate Experience Week, where you do all of the jobs in the fulfillment center. And I thought it was very fun that you're packing the boxes and there's like a timer and, it's telling you what to get. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. It's like real life Tetris when you're packing the boxes, and it's kind of fun. And then you realize, if I was going to do this for 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, this would probably be mind-numbingly boring. But with that being said, what will happen at Amazon, just because I can tell you this for certain, they're looking at automating all of those jobs. It hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. And when that day comes, people are going to be really bent out of shape, and they're going to be crying about, oh my gosh, Amazon just laid off all of these people. And it's going to be like, you know what? The same people who are sitting there and saying that, oh, well, they're making workers stand for 10 hours a day and they're these unsafe conditions. It's completely untrue. Like, humans are capable of so much more. Like, if you look even 100 years ago, 200 years ago, like what kind of work humans are doing. And now you're telling me that a human can't stand for 10 hours a day and put boxes on a 2-inch thick ergo floor that's cushioned. Like, they can't do that. And that's bad for their body. Like, it's just garbage to say. And I think it's actually really, really sad to see, because as a culture, I think we're getting very sensitive, and eventually those jobs are going to be gone. And then what are those people going to do? And I think that's really sad. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. The saddest thing about it that, those jobs are going to be automated. So even though if it changes people's lives now, but it will at some point change it in a direction where if you are not growing in the company, if you're not in a management role or somebody where you make decisions, you won't be there anymore. Like in many other big companies these days, it just all be automated. But this is a big ethical problem that we are all dealing with, and we need to take very seriously. But that's for a different day. So then happens something very unimaginable for people who are 9-to-5ers who are there. So, if we think about you are in this company, you're very well paid, you're working in a dream company, and many would just strive to be there at your position. And now you are decided to just leave it and go to work for yourself for much less money and even move across the ocean. What happened there?
Yeah, well, the real story, the very truthful story about that is I was dating a girl, and I was working at Amazon. She was in Florida, I was in Texas, and I was flying almost every weekend to see her. And I was also traveling at the time. Amazon gave me a lot of vacation, maybe almost 3 weeks total in paid time off. And so I had taken a trip earlier that year to Egypt, and it was really great. And then I had taken a trip to Indonesia to go to Bali. And the same guy from the first story, who was the president of the Entrepreneurship Club, we had traveled around a bunch. He was living in the Philippines at the time. He flew down to Indonesia to come to Bali with us. We had a great trip in Bali. And I remember flying back on the plane from Bali thinking, okay, I just took a trip to Egypt maybe a month ago. I just taken this trip to Bali. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to take another serious trip for like 6 months, right? I was going to have to reaccumulate my paid time off. And so that was like part of it. Then the other part of it was I was dating this girl. We ended up, she came on the trip with us to Bali. We ended up breaking up. And so I text the guy, Eric, and I just say, hey, because he had met her on the trip. And I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that, me and this girl broke up. And he's like, oh, well, give me a call. And so I think he's going to console me, make me feel better. And he gets on the phone and he's like, hey, man, well, sorry to hear that happened, but I didn't really like her anyway. Now that there's nothing, because he knew I was like sticking at Amazon. I was going to like plan on moving. She was going to go to medical school. I was planning on moving to meet her. And he was like, well, now that there's nothing holding you down, why don't you quit your job at Amazon and, move out to the Philippines? I have this creative company. I really need help scaling it. Why don't you quit your job and move out here? And so it was a combination of these factors. Like, I really enjoyed my job at Amazon. I was very safe and, very secure, but I knew deep down that, okay, this wasn't going to be sustainable. I was one of the people that was going to get burnt out. I wasn't going to be able to wait 4 years until my stock vested. And, I just wasn't in this relationship anymore. And I also knew just from talking to other people that I was right at the point, it was about a year into Amazon where I was about to get promoted, right? I was about to switch, because this is what they do at Amazon is they give you the opportunity to switch locations, which I was interested in doing. I was going to switch locations. I was going to get promoted. And then what Amazon does is they're very smart is they offer you a new compensation plan. They give you new stock. And so it's like, now you have to wait longer for that new stock to vest. And so they just keep you on this wheel. And so it was kind of the perfect timing before any of that happened. And I thought, okay, if I go down this Amazon rabbit hole, I'm just going to keep taking it on and taking it on and taking it on. And if I don't do this now, this is something, even though if it's very risky, if I don't do this now, this is something that I'll regret forever. And so I gave it some thought. I think it was the next day I decided, okay, yeah, I knew deep down it's what I wanted to do. So I quit my job. I told my boss and I was like, hey, I just want to know if I totally fail, can I come back and work for Amazon? And he's like, we'd love to have you back, and they were actually they were really cool about it as well. And so, I quit my job. And then about a month later was in the Philippines in Manila.
Well, there's a lot of golden nuggets there. Again, I think the last thing that you said is very important. I keep on saying that as well. If you're a good employee, well, they want to have you back. So if you just quit and try entrepreneurial journey, the worst thing that will happen, you're just going to go back and work exactly where you were with the same people who are working. You're just going to miss a year, but then nothing will change. And so there's no really risk there. So that's amazing. But making that shift, it's to many people, it's crazy. I did the same thing. And I remember also thinking, 10 or like, I think I had like 15 or actually 4 weeks of vacation. I would be like, that's amazing, but just 4 weeks. I want to have vacation, I don't know, every day. I don't want to have 4 weeks because I mean, what I do other time I still work for somebody. Other time I'm still locked in this ecosystem that I need to do what people expect me to do, and I cannot breathe freely. So I'm completely with you. And I did the same thing, decided to go traveling. And when I say my boss, like, I'm going traveling, he's like, you're crazy. I would see in his eyes that he's like, you're crazy. Are you going to sue us? Why are you living this corporate thing? I had like amazing contract. And I would be like, just because I like it, but I just don't want to be here anymore. And he would not understand because he's like corporate guy for many years. He would look at me and he would not understand. He would think that I would sue them, that there will be problem. And I'm like, no problem. I love you guys, but I just need to leave. And so I completely relate.
And the thing that I'll say too is like, it wasn't because even since I've started doing this, I don't think I've ever taken 4 weeks where I haven't been doing anything. It's what it really was more than anything was about the location independence and the location freedom. And I think earlier you were mentioning that you were in Valencia right now. Like, I remember before I started working at Amazon, I took a trip, maybe it was like 15 days, a Europe trip with other entrepreneurs. They were other FBA sellers, and we started up in Norway, and we moved our way all the way down around Spain through Portugal and back up. And it was like 15 days. And like during the trip, we all had our laptops. We were working remote and we were getting things done. The thing that was crazy for me about Amazon is like, I didn't mind doing the hours. I don't mind putting in the work. It wasn't like I was really even looking for more vacation. I just didn't want to have to physically come back to Houston every weekend, right? Like that was what's crazy to me. Is like, I felt like I could do that job from anywhere. And so that's really what I was searching for. I remember, we stopped in Valencia on the trip, and like every day was like a new place. And it's like, as long as I could sit and get my work done, that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I knew I wanted to do deep down. Like that was more valuable than anything else to me.
Yeah, 100%. I can relate. And we've been living in place. What I love about our lifestyle, and I'm with a wife and a small kid and a dog. So for me, it's like a huge company with me. And amazing is that we want to stay in Valencia. We do stay in Valencia. We want to go somewhere else, or we want to take another week here. We'll be another month here. We can do it, which employees cannot do. But I think I'm a developer. So if you're like a developer, well, you can work from anywhere for sure. There's no need to be in the office. So for me, it was always this thing that I can work from anywhere in the world. Why would I stay in one place? And I like warm weather. Some people like winters. I don't like winters. So I would be like, well, now in Valencia, it's like plus 20 or something outside. It's nice. But some people are just freezing their asses off in some cold places. So if you have a choice to be independent, you probably should take it, I think. But there's no risk because, as we all know, we're just going to go back to where we started. And if you're good, you're just going to find work anyway. Okay, I'm going on a tangent. So if we go back to your story, so then you decided to work on this agency, you decided to be entrepreneur. You were saying that this was the hardest thing you ever done. So can you tell me more about that? Why was the hardest thing?
Yeah, sure. So the job was when I moved out to the Philippines was to help scale a creative agency called Virtuous Graphics. And so basically the business was a creative company for Amazon FBA sellers. At the time, they did photography and they did graphic design. My whole job was to come out, move to the Philippines, and help grow the team. When I got there was maybe about 8 full-time employees. And we were supposed to, how can we, just a pretty straightforward business case. Like, how can we get more clients? How can we increase our average order value? And how can we, essentially increase the scope of what we do as a business? And so the first maybe month and a half, 2 months was really just not trying to make any changes, really just trying to figure out, okay, what is this thing? Who are our clients? What is the customer base? I was pretty familiar with Amazon FBA. I knew what the business model was. I was pretty familiar with that business as well. And so pretty early on, we ended up adding on 2 additional departments. We really wanted to do everything for the listing. So we added on copywriting and we added on video, took on a bunch of new hires, transitioned people that were part-time to full-time, just like found new workers. And so over a period of almost 2 years, took that to more than 25 full-time creatives. We switched locations for our studio, really built out, a full photography studio, built a really cool company culture. Through that time, though, there was obviously a lot of scenarios where just I had come from a corporate background. I had managed employees in the past, but this was at a whole new level because there were so many people. It was just so much that was going on all at once. I think that it was like what I compare it to is especially like early on, it was those days that you just worked, because I was working with that guy, Eric, my business partner. And it was those days that you would work the entire day. You were absolutely exhausted. And by entire day, I mean like long day, like not an 8-hour day, like a long day. And they would be like late at night, early in the morning, like 2, 3 in the morning. And you were so exhausted, but you were also so excited about what was going on that you just couldn't even sleep. You just wanted to keep going and keep going. And so I think it all started to become really real, like around, I came in the spring, and then around maybe summer into the fall. That's when we really started to see, okay, all of these things we had been building, the team, the new website, all of these processes and SOPs that we had built out. Now is the time to execute. And when we launched what we essentially called Virtuous Graphics 2.0, which is like, hey, we've made all of these changes. We've added all these really cool things. I remember we were in Vietnam at the time. We were taking a trip, kind of traveling around. That was we had set up the team, and then we moved to Vietnam for half of a month. And I remember clicking send on the MailChimp, and then we started to see the stuff come through. We had like shot a video talking about this new company, and it was like it had like a 75% open rate, and like the click-through rate was like it was like a crazy high. And then we started to see the sales come in, and we started to see the calendar book up, and we're like, oh my gosh, this works. Like this is really, really going to work. And so I'm kind of getting tied up here, but it was a really good, interesting mix of like high emotions and low emotions. And sometimes there was those moments where it was just like, we're crushing it, we're killing it. And then there's also problems just with scaling, sometimes scaling a little bit too quick, maybe biting off a little bit more we can chew. And then you have to kind of, okay, we went too fast. Now we got to backpedal. And that was my first time really running a business and learning that finesse between the two of growing, but not growing too quick. And definitely a lot of learning lessons for sure.
Yeah. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your main tasks for your agency were to optimize listings for FBA sellers. So people will not forgive me if I don't ask you a couple questions about your learnings there, because I think you probably saw thousands, you and your team probably saw thousands of different listings. So what are some of the most common mistakes that people make that also cost them the most money? Can you talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the biggest mistake that most sellers would make, and this was kind of the whole basis of the agency, is that at the time, there were very few, if any, agencies that were specifically tailored to Amazon FBA. So there was like photographers, there was graphic designers, there was people who make video, but very few of them were specific to FBA. They weren't catering to that niche. And so what a lot of people were doing, where they were sellers, they had these huge product lines making a ton of money, but they were going, and their creative work was either coming from, they would go to Fiverr, they would go to Upwork. And the people who were doing the creative work, they weren't really thinking about an e-commerce environment. They were just really thinking about like taking a good photo. And so that's really where we differentiated ourselves. And probably like the biggest tip is like, don't just have a graphic designer make you an infographic. You really have to think about what is going to increase conversion rates in an e-commerce environment. And a lot of that really comes down to like, how can you send the most compelling visual messages about your product, and how can you do it really simply in a really concise way? Like, because when someone's shopping on Amazon, they're not like a captive audience. They're very distracted. And so you need to be very efficient in how you send that information. And so a lot of people on e-commerce, They might even have beautiful listings, but the messaging isn't very clear, and so their conversion rate is very low. And so I think that's like the biggest tip is to work with people who really understand Amazon. But then the tip beyond that is just to really double down on just creative output in general. Like how you differentiate brands now on Amazon really comes down to how clean your brand looks, if it looks reputable. And so my biggest tip is like, if you look honestly at your e-commerce product, whether it's Amazon or off Amazon, and it doesn't look like something that came out of a magazine, if it doesn't look professional, like, and really ask yourself, is this something that I'd seen in a magazine? If the answer is no, then you need to start thinking about how to make it look as if it does, because that's how you're going to stand out in the future.
And I guess that's a good segue to where you're now, because one of the ways to make sure that people perceive it as it looks in magazine is to split test. And I think you were talking about that at some point. You were a little bit burned out, and your company got bought out, and then you decided to join PickFu or PickFu. What's the right pronunciation of that?
PickFu, yeah, that's perfect.
PickFu. Okay, so you decided to join PickFu. Can you talk about that period of your life, and then we're going to talk about how to split test in PickFu?
Yeah, sure. So we grew the agency. Grew it to a pretty big size. Like I said earlier, I was really happy about the culture that we had built. We built a really tight-knit team, and eventually, it was like in September of 2019, we had. It was kind of interesting because now we hear a lot about these big name private equity companies. Like you hear about Thrasio and you hear about all these other ones. And at the time, there was a smaller private equity company that was actually based out of Manila, and there was an opportunity that came, and they made an offer to acquire us. And so there was some back and forth about whether we should or shouldn't do it, and we ended up doing it. I don't know if in the end, if it was really the right decision. I think my business partner was saying, what's really crazy to me is that at the time, it felt like it had been really long. But in reality, it was less than 2 years since I got to Manila to when we sold the business, but it felt like it had been much, much longer than that. Then my business partner was kind of telling me like, hey, we should maybe just not sell this. Maybe we should just hold on to it. And, we'll be able to exit much higher like a year from now. And we had still a lot of puzzle pieces to put together, but we ended up deciding to sell the company. And so we helped through the transition period, which was maybe about 6 months. And then in January, I had made a little bit of money, but not like enough money to never work again. And so one of the tools that we used very heavily at the agency was PickFu. And so we use PickFu mainly for main image testing. So we had a service where we would go and create essentially multiple versions of a main image. We would use PickFu to test it, and then the seller would know what main image they should try. And so when I was at a conference earlier in the year, I had met the founders, Justin and John of PickFu. I'd met them at a conference in Vegas. And so when I had left Virtuous Graphics, I hit them up, and I was like, I really thought that PickFu was this amazing tool, but not that many people had used. And it wasn't really well known in the community. So I reached out to them, and I was like, hey, I think we can really take this tool to the next level. I would like to come on and get this everywhere, go to conferences and speak on podcasts and really work with other top level sellers and consultants on creating case studies around the useful applications. And then also, figuring out where's PickFu good for, where's PickFu not good for. And so I pitched them, and I came on in March. And so that was the story. Yeah.
Amazing. We do have questions from our viewers, but before we get there, I just want to continue PickFu, and then we'll get to Denise's question. So I'll tell you how I use PickFu, and maybe it will be useful for people and useful for you as the person who represents PickFu. And you tell me if I'm doing it right or wrong, and then we're going to go into some use cases. What is the right version of using PickFu? Because the tool allows you to do anything, but it's an amazing tool, but you can go in the rabbit holes and just lose yourself. And it's also pretty expensive, so you can lose a lot of money if you don't know what exactly you're doing. So how we use PickFu is we use it on a product research step. So let's say I'm planning to release a new spatula. So I work with my 3D mockup guy to create a spatula that's better than anyone else's. And then I would create an Amazon image of that spatula. Then I would go to Amazon, I would search for spatulas, and I would find ones that are in my niche that are the best ones, I guess, the most reviews. And then I would put those against mine, and I would ask people, which one would you prefer? And I would iterate on that. And people will give me feedback. They'll saying, oh, we don't like this spatula, because sometimes I would have amazing product, I would think, and people will say, that's a crap. We'll never buy that. It happened to me multiple times. And then when I'm like, okay, so I listen to their feedback, I try to adjust, and then I do it until the moment when my spatula looks better than the spatula that are selling the most on Amazon. And then this is when I start ordering it and starting to launching it on Amazon. What do you think about that strategy? What am I doing wrong? What would you do?
Yeah, that's exactly how I would recommend doing it. There's a lot of applications for PickFu, but the best way is for early validation and help with different creative routes that you want to go. The way that I like to explain it is we had a consultant come in and kind of explain to us market research outside of the third-party seller e-commerce environment. What they were telling us is that a big company like Nike or Under Armour, when they launch a product, they're spending anywhere from $45,000 to $75,000 US per product just on market research. And so the reason that they do that, it seems excessive, but the reason they do that is because when they put a product to market, they really want to be sure that they're not putting something out that is not well thought out, right? That they're not making key and core mistakes that are going to end up costing them more down the road. And so exactly what you're saying is, I think most people would actually have much more successful launches if they integrated some kind of market research into their process when they're launching a product. I think what is the problem a lot of time is that many sellers, they do their product research, right? And Helium 10 or whatever the tool is says like, oh, you should sell this product. This is a hot product. And then that's where they stop, right? They're like, okay, I'm done with the research now. And that's not true, right? There's so many different things you could change, from your product design to your packaging to even your pricing, all of these different things that when you launch the product could completely change how successful the launch is. And so if you can validate early on, and maybe you do the PickFu testing and you don't create a spatula that's better than your competitors, but at least maybe you don't actually go and spend all the money, or you figure out one thing that you're doing along the way that would have completely shifted the way in which your launch would have gone. So it sounds like you're doing it very, very right.
And for us, it's been a couple products that we would say, well, this is amazing, we should launch it. And then we're running for PickFu, and people would say differently. People were like, no, don't go there. It doesn't look good. The existing ones are amazing. You will just drop the product. But if we launch it, we might lose some money. Maybe we will win, but I need to have more assurance because I don't have a lot of budgets to play with. And I'm launching one product at a time. So for me, it's very important to create the best possible product. And that's why I think PickFu so far helped us a lot. We're launching our first product based on PickFu findings. And I'll keep everyone updated how it goes, because it's case study for us. And if it goes well, this will be tool that we're going to we'll be continue using. I think it's amazing. So kudos to PickFu. Now let's get to the questions. So let me show that on the screen. So Denisa asks, hi Anatoly and Anthony, thanks for this valuable episode. My question is, if you would patent the design from the get-go when you're new in Amazon, and this is your first product for you. So do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I don't, getting a patent is a long process, especially in the United States, as well. Even if you have a product that's completely unique, there's different types of patents also as well. A functionality patent and a design patent, and so I don't know if I'd recommend to anyone trying to get a patent right off the bat. Most of the products that you're going to sell on Amazon, that you're going to sell in FBA at least, are going to be somewhat validated, right? You're probably not going to sell something that's a brand new invention. You're doing some research, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, I'm going to come in, I'm going to try to sell a very similar product, but I'm going to, through optimizations, either in the listing or in the branding, I'm going to try to create something that's better than that exists out there and occupy probably not all of the market share, but a portion of that market share, and to get some income on. So number one is, you probably 99% of products that people sell on Amazon are probably not patentable, right? You probably can't get a patent for it because there's other people selling it. That's the very nature of it. If you did create a product that was something that you could actually get a patent on, a design patent or a utility patent on, I probably wouldn't recommend launching it through Amazon. Amazon is the place to launch products that are already validated. If you're selling something that's a brand new invention, something that never has been seen by the market, you probably don't want to sell that on Amazon. You probably want to start it off at a crowdfunding thing like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And again, you want to do that validation in front, right? Before you go and spend all of this money and this time going and getting a patent, you want to see, will people actually buy the product? So go and create a 3D render, go and create a landing page and see, okay, could I actually pre-sell this or get some kind of commitment to buy? Because when you put something on Amazon, when people go to Amazon, they already know what they're searching for. They have the intent to buy. So they're going to go in there and they're going to type in, spatula. But if you have like a new spatula that's going to, I don't know, it's going to like twist your spaghetti noodles in a special way, and you go and try to sell that on Amazon next to all the other spatulas, you have to educate them first. They won't know why your product is better. And so you actually are going to want to launch something like that off of Amazon. In regards to your patent question, I think very rarely is it going to make sense to get a patent. You got to have a really special idea. I would recommend talking to a lawyer first, maybe getting like a sanity check of just like, or go to PickFu, right? Tell, everyone on the PickFu panel is bound by a non-disclosure agreement. So put it up there and say like, hey, here's the product. Maybe have a video of how your patented product would work and say like, would you buy this or what's your thought? And before you go and spend a lot of money and time on getting a patent, maybe people tell you this is the coolest thing. I would totally use it. Or maybe you find out that's not the case. So hope that helps.
Yeah. Great answer. Yeah, no much to add. I know that sometimes people they mix patents with trademarks. So if by any means you meant the trademark, I'm sure you meant patent design, but what I recommend people is to trademark your brands because it allows you to get into brand registry and allows you to have some protection, a little bit of protection from hijackers, also you to create beautiful stores. Maybe not for your first product. Some people say first product, you need just to check it out and see how it works, see if there's traction. But if there is a traction, that might be a good way to go. So I'm going to end at this. So thank you. And now let's get to the PickFu discussion. So a couple questions about PickFu that I'm interested in, people might be interested in as well. How do you find people who are the reviewers for PickFu?
Yeah, that's the question we get all the time. That's what I'm asking. It's not so complicated. We actually use a third-party testing service, so we actually don't get the panelists per se ourselves. We get a pool of panelists. Now, what we do when the third party gives us those panelists is we actually go through and we select who we want to be on our panel specifically. And so basically what we do is we put them through a pretty rigorous vetting process of like different test assignments, and we put them through some education as well. So the people who are on the panel, they are fully briefed on the fact that, okay, the responses that you're giving, they're going out to business owners. You need to be thoughtful in your responses. You really need to think about, okay, how can you provide as much information as possible? And then what we've been doing, because PickFu's been around for almost 8 years now, we actually have a whole process and actually a machine learning algorithm that we've been training over the past few years to look at the responses of the people on the panel. And it actually kind of evaluates, is this response helpful or is this response not helpful? And so that all comes from business owners who have been getting their PickFu results. They can actually click helpful or not helpful on their polls. And when people give helpful responses, then they are given a little bit of a bonus. And then when people give not helpful responses, they're actually removed from that panel. And so of the people that we get from the third-party testing agency, I'd say the vast majority are removed before they're ever even able to give a response that goes out to our users. And then as time goes on, people are just weeded out and weeded out and weeded out. And so we've got more than 10,000 people on that panel. They're all based in the US right now. We're expanding to other markets. That's going to happen this year. And then the other question is like, they're not just doing this for fun. They are getting paid, right? Like obviously they're getting paid. But yeah, they're real people. And you can see from the responses, like they're real people. And if they give bad responses, they're removed very quickly from the panel.
That's actually really good. I did not know that because I know there's helpful, not helpful. I always thought it's for me to sort of filter them. But now I'll use that more.
It's kind of a cool insurance policy that if you're ever like, not a lot of people actually know this, but if you're going through and you click not helpful, we'll actually automatically go through and replace that response. And it is helpful because not only is it good for you because you get better quality responses, but it does help train that machine learning algorithm that we have.
Amazing. I'll use that more because some of the responses are amazing. People go into length, and yeah, I'm just like blown away by the information they're giving me, and I really, really value. So if you guys watching that and you're a PickFu reviewer, thank you. I really, really appreciate you. But sometimes it's like, I'm not into spatulas, and I'm like, okay, I understand that, but well, I need somebody who is. So, and I know you can target people as well. So now we're doing more into sort of we're trying to target the right audiences and stuff like that. So it's very, very cool. So I'm not paid by PickFu. I'm not associated with PickFu, but I am a fan. My only complaint would be that it is a little bit expensive, especially if you go into targeting. But for us so far, I think it's worth it. I don't know. I'm going to let you guys know when we launch a product. I hope it's going to be fully worth it. But for now, I think we're able to eliminate a lot of wrong things from our heads and from our plans. So I'm really, really happy with PickFu so far. A couple more questions. A question that I ask every entrepreneur. I know that your journey looks amazing. You made a couple of risks and you probably made lots of right decisions, but I'm always excited or interested, I guess, about the failures because this is where you grow the most. So can you talk about a couple of big failures that you had in your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Just tons of failures along the way. I was really lucky that in my first business, I was working with my business partner, Eric, who had been an entrepreneur for a number of years before we started working together. And there was definitely a few times that, I mean, I'll be completely honest, I don't have any shame admitting this, but there's a few times that like I was straight up crying, like, dude, I don't know what we're going to do. And he's like, hey man, calm down. You're going to be fine. Like, this is going to be okay. But definitely made some big mistakes. I'd say the biggest ones were early hiring mistakes. Like when we brought on our video department the first time, we hired a group of people. I guess like a few hiring mistakes that basically we hired on a group, a number of individuals. We knew deep down that they weren't a fit, that they weren't like up to the level of output that we needed in terms of like how hard they were working, in terms of their ability to manage themselves. And there's maybe a few other examples with other employees. And what I realized at that point is like the minute you come to the decision that we need to fire an employee, that you give the feedback and you give them like the one chance to say, okay, look, you're very, very close to getting fired. And then you give them that feedback. And then sometimes people change. Like sometimes they'll be like, okay, this was like my last warning. And if I don't like change how I'm doing things, then I'm going to leave. But what we did, or what I did really and specifically, is that I gave that feedback, but then we just kept the people on, and we kept them on way too long. And so that was something that I really, really learned. I don't want to say the hard way, but definitely like when you come to that conclusion, you got to be ready to. Most employees, I think, are going to be able to stick around. But when you have those employees that you know deep down, this is not a fit in my organization, you have to remove them quick. And keeping them on is only going to be really, really negatively impactful for the business. So that would be one thing that I definitely a mistake I learned. Another mistake that I definitely learned from is in regards to overselling and selling too fast, selling before your capabilities. I'd say the vast majority of our clients at Virtuous Graphics were very, very satisfied. We were doing at the end when we left more than $75,000 in revenue in a month, which was just crazy to me. Like it might not be big for other business owners, but it was very big for me at the time. To grow to that size and to grow to that scale. We had very, very, very few issues, but there was probably like one order a month that for whatever reason just wouldn't be up to par. And so if there's one thing that I learned, it's that when it comes to selling, especially if you're someone who's a good salesperson or you build a good sales team, closing the deal is actually getting money for a business and a service business is the easiest thing in the world, right? You can go and you can close deals left and right all day long, right? You can get on the close and close as many deals. But if you don't have the team to fulfill those orders and you don't have the processes to fill it in a reasonable amount of time, you're never going to lead to a reorder. And you're only going to end up burning your reputation. And so I actually help as an advisor to run an agency now. And it's really helpful to have learned from these scenarios because number one, my business partner that I have now, sometimes he'll be stressed and frustrated. And I feel like I'm the one who can be like, nope, I've been here before. We're totally fine. This is totally good. But I've also taken in that experience that, okay, if you're working inside of a small community, you really have to be very careful about your reputation. And so now I'm much more careful about, I would much rather grow at a slower rate and make less money in the short term, but really focus on building that reputation long term. Because if you're not able to really if you over deliver, there's going to be an unlimited amount of business that you're going to be able to take in. And if you're consistent over the long term, no one will be able to beat you as a service provider. And so those are a couple of the real big lessons I've learned. The other thing that I'll say too is like, I think how everything went when we sold the business, I won't get into it too much detail. I don't like I think there's a lot of people that are talking. I've seen other interviews and people are saying, well, I don't regret any decision in my life. And they're like, you really own your decisions. And I agree with that to some degree. But if I can save someone else from making a similar mistake, I think it's best to be transparent. And I will say that based on everything I can see about the scenario of us selling the business, I would agree that my business partner was absolutely right, that we sold the business too early. And so what I would encourage other entrepreneurs to do, especially because there's all of these big money in Amazon now, and people are really aggressive in that acquisition space, really ask yourself, you probably know deep down that you want to sell the business, but timing is a really important factor of it. And so I think sometimes it's very attractive to say, okay, I'm going to have someone come in and they're going to buy the business, and you've been working so hard and you want to sell at that very moment. I can tell you for certain that we were too early in selling, that if we would have waited that extra year, that yes, we had been working really, really hard for 2 years, but like it was much more of a decision based on that than if we actually thought about it logically, like, okay, we could stick this out for another 2 years and we would have gotten much more money. The transition would have gone much smoother. We probably would have been able to exit with a different company in that regard. And so I think patience is actually very, very key. If you're going with something that's going in an uphill trajectory and you know deep down that you're just, I think what was, it was like we were just getting to the point where I was just really starting to figure out how the thing was actually running. And then that is not the time that you want to exit. And so I think that's something, being a younger guy, everything that I had done in my life previously was these all like shorter things. And so now I even see that, like, if I had been in PickFu, for example, I might have like left, I'm going to leave after a year. But now I know deep down, I'm like, no, I'm just now starting to figure out what I'm doing. It's like, I'm going to stay here for, 5 years plus, because you don't really start to get good at something until you've been doing it for a while. So patience, if you can wait something out, is very, very valuable.
Wow. Thank you. I love that question, because every time I'm just getting blown away by the amount of information I learn from people. So many golden nuggets. Thank you. The other question I do ask every entrepreneur is, let's say you are starting out, you just have $5,000, you don't have any connections, no lists, nothing, but you have some debts you need to pay in, let's say, 60, 90 days, and you know what you know. That's the only thing you have, and $5,000. What would your strategy be in a couple sentences?
So for me, I've always been on the service side of things, service business. I wouldn't try to do a product business just because I think 5,000, I definitely don't have the knowledge set to do it. Even the product business I have has only ever been done with my business partner, who would handle the physical product business. So yeah, I would do service. I feel very confident in my ability to manage other employees, specifically people in the Philippines. And so slam dunk, I would start some kind of agency, no question about it. I would, knowing exactly what I know now, I would probably stick to something like maybe graphic design. I don't talk publicly about the other agency I'm working with, but somewhere in that space, that's what I'm doing right now. But yeah, something creative. And it would really just I would try to pick a very specific niche, and I would try to do like maybe video production, and essentially go and arbitrage the cost of outsourced labor, create a brand around an agency. And I honestly probably wouldn't even need $5,000. That would be enough for a couple months before starting to get clients. Like, the cool thing about a service-based business is you can start making money almost right off the bat if you have the knowledge and the know-how. And I feel like I've got pretty good chops when it comes to being a creative director. And so the thing is, I don't think I'd even need $5,000 to start it, but $5,000 would be a nice little buffer to like pay the first month of salaries. I'd probably get about, I would in that case, I would just function as a creative director, and then I would probably just hire, a graphic designer, and maybe I wouldn't do photography. I think photography is a little bit too hands-on. I'll probably just do like graphic design, and then things related to creating infographics around Amazon, and just scale as quickly as I could. Yeah.
Here you go, guys. Here's the strategy for you who just have $5,000 to probably launch out your business. Thank you. The last segment I have, and it's a very short one, it's called rapid fire questions. I ask same quick questions to every entrepreneur and see how you respond. So how did your life change when you started making a significant amount of money from before you start, when you're working for free, to the points, guys? So in terms of lifestyle, can you tell me what changed for you?
Well, what I'll say is that money is a really interesting thing. And you'll notice this when you travel around the world, that depending on where you are in the world, money is fundamentally different, right? So like you're in Valencia right now, cost of living is very reasonable. Based on, from what I understand, you've spent some time, maybe lived in Eastern Europe, right? Like very low cost of living. I spent a lot of time in Asia. And so what's really interesting is like, when I'm living in Manila in the Philippines, the amount of money that I make there, even a couple of years ago, was enough to put me in a very high level of society. Like I can afford to live in the nicest apartment. I can go out to eat all the time. I have a maid. I don't ever drive myself anywhere. And then I've spent some time in the US this year, and it's like the amount of money that I had puts me very, very much in the middle. And so what's really interesting is when you can actually travel and get that thought, it really starts to put in perspective that it doesn't matter how much money you have. And I have a lot of friends now, which is very fun. I have a lot of friends that are very rich, and like they go out and we party and they take us out to dinners, and it's like, oh, don't worry. And they make so much money that like they just cover the bill, and I don't even feel bad about it. And they're paying for everyone. And it really puts it in perspective that like, okay, you can make as much money as you want, but there's always going to be another thing to chase. And in fact, like I can make 10 times more money than I'm making now. And if I'd moved to like, San Francisco or to Miami, I would still be like, okay, maybe I'm just like in the middle of the people who have a lot of money. And so if your goal at the end of the day is money, you're just going to keep chasing another thing. What I try to chase and how my lifestyle has really changed is just in terms of the freedom. So I'm at the point now and I'm just now getting to this point, and it's crazy because I made a lot of money at Amazon. I feel like I'm just now getting back to a financial point where I actually have enough money to really breathe again, and just not really have to worry about it. But I'm at the point now where it's like, it's just like fun little things. You can kind of just do whatever you want. And the cost of living can be so low. I'm sure, as a developer, like you're making a lot more than you want to spend. And so the money that you are spending, it's on experiences, it's on things that you really like to do. And so it's just a lot more enjoyable standard of a life. For me, I just like traveling. And so like, I just want to live in like a nicer apartment and like, have all of the things in life. If I get to the end of my life and like, I don't think this is what's going to happen. But like when COVID all started, I legitimately said, because I wasn't sure how big all this was going to get. I remember legitimately saying like, if I die right now, I feel like I've lived a very, very good life. I've been to almost 50 countries. I've done some crazy stuff, and I feel very happy with that. And I don't think necessarily you should be looking at accumulating so much wealth as accumulating experiences. And I feel very fulfilled. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Traveling makes everything, puts everything in perspective. And for sure, for me, the same. I'm just upgrading a little bit my lifestyle when I'm in places that are more expensive. So I could live in like 2-bedroom apartment with a like young son instead of living in a 1-bedroom apartment. But other than that, I'm still not driving cars or not owning properties. I'm just enjoying myself. So we're on the same page. So a couple more questions. One is, since you're telling about traveling and you traveled in more than 50 countries, which is amazing, what is one travel destination that you keep on going back to and you recommend, let's say me as digital nomad, to 100% visit?
But number one on my list, it was the first country I had ever been to outside of the US and Canada, and it's Iceland. Iceland is so amazing. It's so special. There's a reason it's hyped up. And the really cool thing about it is, you've got the main capital, which is Reykjavik. That's where everyone flies into. And most people will only go a couple hours outside of Reykjavik. But what's actually really cool is that the entire country, there's one road that goes around the entire thing. It's called One. And you can actually drive around the entire country in maybe 4 or 5 days if you're making good pace. And the really cool thing about Iceland is as you go around different parts of the country, it looks very visually different. And so there's like Arctic tundra. There's places where it looks like you're on the moon, and it's like volcanic wasteland. Just some really beautiful places. And so if you can take the time and kind of road trip around the entire country, it's actually not that expensive. You can get Airbnbs, and it's very reasonable. I've gone twice. It's high on the list to go back. It's a place that you definitely won't be disappointed. But if you're going, make sure you get out of Reykjavik, because it's very popular now. And so within about 2 hours of the capital, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of tourists. But as soon as you get outside of that loop, you'll be all by yourself. And it's just absolutely beautiful.
Well, that's at top of my list as well. So I'm happy that you talk about Iceland, because that's where I want to go. The other question is, what book or books, if you are an avid reader, like I'm an avid reader, so I'm always looking for book recommendations. So if you are, what book or books have influenced you the most in your journey?
Yeah, sure. So I think probably one of this is not a business book, but it's a nonfiction book, and it's called Better Angels of Our Nature. And then it's got a secondary title, like I think it's Why War Has Declined. But essentially, it's a really good book because it goes from a historical perspective from a few thousand years ago to a few hundred years ago. And it talks about what life was like, even in recent history, and how hard things were, like how many wars there were, and what it was like to go to work, and like what the environment was. And it all kind of lays out this premise that if you actually think about things from a logical standpoint, it doesn't matter what you turn on the news and what you see on the news. Our world is actually in a place where people are more accepting, people are more loving, people are less violent. It's just, it is a more peaceful world than we've ever been in. And if you turn on the news, it won't tell you that. It'll tell you that people are bad and people are angry and everyone's fighting and everyone hates each other. And it's just not the reality. It's just not the case at all. Like, where are you from originally?
From Latvia, Eastern Europe.
Right. Like, think about this, right? Like, I'm from the United States. You're from Latvia. Like, how many friends do we have that are from all different parts of the world that even within a couple of generations, mass global conflict would have ever kept us from talking? And we're so interconnected. And so basically, the reason this book is really good is because it dramatically will shift your perspective that this is actually the best time outside of technology, just in terms of like how humans are now. It's by far the best time to be alive. There's so much opportunity. And if you're able to get past all of the noise, you realize how grateful and how lucky we are to be alive right now. It really puts it in perspective. And so I'm not even going to recommend their business books. It's great. And you can actually get the audio on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to get it. And that reminds me of another book that's very popular that I also recommend people to read. It's called Sapiens by Yuval Harari. And the same premise is that if we would live like 500 years ago, you would be sleeping in a tent and you either get raped or killed the next day. So right now we're sitting in those comfy chairs and talking to each other. So we're very, very lucky. So, but yeah, I'm gonna get that book for sure. The last question I do ask every entrepreneur, since this is my journey, I ask every guest of the podcast to give me an advice. Currently, I am running an Amazon FBA business. I'm doing around 200,000 in revenue a year, selling 2 products. I want to scale to 1 million and then to 10 million. So knowing what you know, not too much, as we're very secretive in this Amazon FBA space, what advice could you give me?
For scaling to the next level, it really depends on the product in the category, because at some point it might, in terms of taking it to the next level, it might actually be very difficult. I don't know if I'm the best to advise specifically on Amazon FBA, just because everything I've done has been more on the service side of the business. I will say, look very, very hard at your conversion rate. And if your conversion rate, I always say that a good base conversion rate is around 8 to 10%, a good conversion rate 20%, and a great conversion rate of about 45% plus. If you're under those numbers, take a really hard look at your conversion rate. The fastest way that you're going to be able to grow ranking and grow a brand is if Amazon sends people to your listing, will they actually go and become a customer? And so if your conversion rate is on the lower end, and sometimes people even have a conversion rate 20, 30%. You can go much, much higher than that. And so for certain product types, if your conversion rate is lower, I would consider, like, how can you go and double down on your creative and send more compelling visual messages that's going to convince someone when they land on the listing, like, yep, this is what I found. Let me go and add it to my cart. And if your conversion rate is in a really good spot, then it's going to allow you to grow much faster as a brand. It's going to keep your advertising costs low, and it's going to help you just gain ranking over time.
All right. Thank you. Amazing advice. Definitely going to check out my conversion rate for sure. Thank you. This is all my questions. I think you brought a lot of value, and I really, really appreciate you coming. But before we go, where can people find more about you? What's going on in your life? What do you want to share with us?
Sure thing. Yeah. Anyone who wants, they can reach out and hit me up, Anthony@PickFu.com. And yeah, happy to answer any questions in chat.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you, and you have an amazing journey. I hope we'll cross paths again very, very soon. Thank you for taking your time. And for everyone listening, you guys can follow us. Every links are down below. Or if you're listening to that, it's 10 Million Journey on Instagram, on Facebook, facebook.com/10 Million Journey, or subscribe at www.10millionjourney.com. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.